This is Still Here, Still Queer Now What, your companion through LGBTQ plus midlife. I'm Dr. Paul Taylor-Pitt, author of Still Here, Still Queer Now What, the book, coming everywhere 21st of October. Tough one today. I almost recorded something yesterday and couldn't quite work out what I wanted to say, so I thought I'll sleep on it. And then I woke up this morning, Monday morning, and I'm still not sure what I want to say. And so maybe I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to think out loud and imagine that you're nodding along or maybe shaking your head, but I would love to get your take on things, and not just as a way of validating or agreeing with anything that I have to say, but I feel like I need to have a conversation. So maybe turning a monologue into a conversation through commenting, feedback, emailing, whatever you need to do. Because I want to hold up a couple of events from the weekend and just compare them and compare the responses to them, because I'm just struggling to make sense of it, I guess, at the moment. Two events at the weekend, one in London, which was Trans Pride, one in Berlin, which was the Christopher Street Day parade, which we're also calling Berlin Pride. Both events I've been to. Last year, Dan and I went to Berlin for the Christopher Street Day parade. It was our 25th anniversary, and we'd never been to Berlin Pride and had a wonderful time. And Trans Pride I've been to several times, and it just feels like a really important place to be. And so Saturday, just gone, Trans Pride in London. I was very lucky to be marching alongside the London Leathermen, which is always an experience. Probably didn't realise how hot I was going to be, and also that I forgot to wear any kind of sunscreen or a hat. So my scalp is a little bit toasted today because it was very warm. But it was, for me, really important to be there. I want to say great to be there, and it was great to be there. But I noticed the difference very significantly between Pride in London, which happened at the beginning of July, and Trans Pride. And Pride in London really is, a bit of a circus. There's floats, there's lots of glitter. I know that we talk about Pride as a protest. Pride in London doesn't feel like a protest. It feels like a party, and maybe that's okay. But when I contrast it with Trans Pride, which feels so much more like a protest, it was quite significantly different emotionally for me being there, because Pride in London, I feel like we've forgotten what it is that we're fighting for. We don't really have an awful lot to fight against anymore during Pride in London, because technically on the surface we have equal rights under the law. Trans Pride felt different because there was a lot of what are we fighting for and what are we fighting against? And there were lots of clear asks. Whereas Pride in London, and I guess just generally for me as a cisgender gay man, I sometimes wonder what comes in response to what do we want? I'm not sure. People to be nicer to us? I mean, it's a bit of the low bar. Whereas at Trans Pride, there was a genuine hope and demand, actually, that things get better, and rage at the way trans people are treated. It felt much more grassroots. The one side of the street is closed and there's like a tiny little piece of tape that separates us off. People are still doing their shopping on Regent Street and cars are driving down the road. It felt much more homemade, much more like Pride of the past. And I was struck by several things during Trans Pride. Struck by the energy, the sense of collective community, the need to be there. And I was also struck by the utter apathy from the people who were walking past. Some people were taking photos. Most people just ignored us. Bear in mind, there was like 150,000 people there making a lot of noise. Most people just kind of looked and was like, oh, okay. And I thought, what's that about? What is that about? Is it just that genuinely people are kind of indifferent? And in today's political climate, indifference is underrated. I half expected people to be throwing things. I half expected there to be protests, counter protests all along the route. I thought there would be fights. I thought cars would be stopping in the street and throwing litter at us. None of that happened. People just got on with their day. And so I was left going, okay, maybe most people are indifferent. It's just that the people whose opinions I see and hear are the ones who cannot be indifferent. They're the ones who have to say things. They're the ones who have to express their anger at trans people's existence. And so it was an interesting experience to notice that there was so much indifference. Because going online afterwards, as I, to my own detriment, I guess, partly because I was curious, but partly because I'm working on something at the moment, which is trying to understand the complexity of our community. And I dived into Twitter. I refuse to call it X. I dived into Twitter and looked at some of the pieces about trans pride that were coming from anti-trans people. And they're just horrific, utterly horrific, openly horrific, proudly horrific. Now, they weren't there. They weren't standing on the side of the street. They were sitting at home on their phones and they were spewing hatred. That didn't happen in person. That didn't happen in real life. Now, I know that trans people are facing this every single day and they are experiencing hatred in real life every single day. I realize that trans pride is a microcosm of a moment that I get to be part of. And then I also get to walk away and live a cisgender life. But there's something about the difference in intensity of online hatred that if I only looked at that, which is what I've been doing, I would think that I needed to bring a sword and a shield to trans pride. It reminds me a bit of working in HR. Because when you work in HR, you kind of see the most extreme versions of organizational life. You hear the stories that you can't quite believe are true, and most of your time is spent in grievance and disciplinary and terrible behavior. And sometimes it can color your view of what it's like to be in an organization or what it's like to be in the world. And so I'm left after this weekend curious about the indifference in person versus the online rage. And then the news came through about what happened in Berlin, about the attack at Berlin Pride, where people were injured, hurt, terrified, killed. And that hits home. It's incredible to think that in 2026, this is happening. And having been there last year, regardless, I wasn't there this year, but I was there last year, so I could picture it. I could imagine how it looked, the sounds, the atmosphere. What I can't imagine is how it must have felt to be leaving that event when it was called off, thinking, what just happened? Because from a different place in the world, I'm still sitting going, what just happened? And then, of course, and maybe this is the theme or the pattern that I need to learn, I thought, I'll go online, see what people are saying about it. And on Instagram, so many people sending their love, sending their thoughts. Meanwhile, on Twitter, a lot of people who I don't follow, but Twitter just throws up stuff. I follow very few people on Twitter anymore, but, there's that column that says, for you, which is where Twitter says, this is what we think you should be seeing. And what I saw was a huge amount of racist, anti-Muslim, Islamophobic hatred coming from gay people and from white gay people, often white gay men. And their take on this was, this is why we should not allow Muslims in the West. While it's not surprising, it's shocking. I think at the moment we have this very interesting place where people are showing us who they are very clearly. They're showing us their racism. They're showing us their transphobia. There was a whole other thread going on around people who had videoed the access block at Trans Pride, which is Obviously, everyone makes space so that people who have access needs can go at the front. So people who are using wheelchairs, someone had videoed that, and there's a lot of online mockery going on, going, oh, look at these people. And I go, oh, wow. So now, as well as being transphobic, we're just being openly ableist. And so I think I, there's something in my brain that needs to think about this for a lot longer and try and make sense of it, because the reality of this is I don't believe this is anything new. And maybe this is the place that I'm coming to, is that it's always been there. As long as we have been here, racism has been here, transphobia has been here, Islamophobia has been here, misogyny has been here, ableism has been here. It's always been in our community. It's now just very openly showing itself. And my temptation is to fight back with the same amount of rage that they have. But I know that will not sustain me and it will not change anything. And yet, right now, I do not know what the alternative is. And so this piece that I'm working on is almost like an inquiry for myself about how to be in this place where there is so much hostility from people who I once believed were my people. Because maybe they were always there. I just didn't realize it. But now they are very visible. I wrote about this in my book. I wrote a chapter which I called Community Complexity. But I wrote that a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure that I even recognized the depth of complexity that we had to deal with. And some of that comes from a place of ignorance. It comes from a place of whiteness, of not having experienced racism. It comes from a place of being able-bodied, not having experienced ableism. It comes from a place of cisgender privilege, not have experienced transphobia, all of those things where I'm sure a lot of people who will be part of this conversation already will be going, yeah, of course you just didn't realize it, you fool, because you haven't been on the receiving end of it. I've been on the receiving end of homophobia. And what that did to me in my head was split the world into two, good people and homophobes. And now some of those good people are transphobes. And so they're no longer good people to me. So I wish I was able to give some kind of Jerry Springer closing thought here. But I guess the closing thought that I'm leaving with is how do we make sense of this? Because I don't think it's going to get any better soon. In fact, I think it will get worse. In the coming years, in the lead up to a UK election, a US election, our community is going to be used as multiple different types of ball. It's not just a football, it's going to be every kind of ball. And we are going to be pitted against each other. We are going to be used to justify everything. Everything wrong in the world will be projected on us. And my answer once would have been, well, we just need to stick together. But I don't want to stick together with the racists in our community. I don't want to stick together with the transphobes in our community. They are not part of my community. So my closing thought is, help me with your thoughts on this. Help me try to make sense of something which feels impossible to make sense of. Help me understand how to navigate the oncoming storm, because it has felt very stormy to me. And I think that's just the warm up. So anyway, thanks for coming. Happy Monday. Have a lovely week. Equally, I don't believe there is a silver lining here right now. For the people who went to Berlin Pride and did not come home, there is no silver lining here. There is no happy ending. And while I want to remain hopeful, I don't want to be naively blinkered into, of course everything will be okay. Because I don't think everything will be okay if we just sit back. So thank you for being with me for almost 20 minutes while I do some thinking. Big thoughts from a small brain, and maybe we can think on this together.